I shall crack your skull and use your brains to grease my sword. I took Gripper's high seat by the sword, as is our way. And you? Why are you here, Gunnar? You are no Jarl. You are a farmer working some shithole spit of land that your uncle gave you. And your sister is not dead, Ekin. So we will have no more talk of a blood price. How is Ragnhild? Still keeping your bed warm?
What does it take to embody a legendary Norse villain? Not just with your voice, but with every movement of your body. Today we're going beyond the recording booth and into the motion capture studio space, and I'm joined by award-winning voice actor George Waitman to discuss how he transformed into one of Norse Oath of Blood's most formidable foes, Steinar Far-Spear. We will be talking about the physicality of mocap, the psychology of playing the bad guy, and how you bring a Viking warrior to life while covered in sensors instead of armour, and instead of wielding a sword, axe or spear, you have to wear a mobile camera braced inches from your face. Let us explore how the Vikings are represented in the virtual world in Norse Oath of Blood. Welcome to the Valhalla podcast. Welcome George Waitman, otherwise known as Steinar Far-Spear.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I have to kick things off because, of course, I am personally delighted because I've been following you all online. Congratulations on your OneVoice award.
Thank you so much. I'm still buzzing. I've slightly stopped mainlining the adrenaline. It's been about 3 days, so I sort of collapsed. But I'm still delighted. It was a surprise. Well, surprise, but one I very much wanted. So I'm happy as Steinar after a very bloody raid. So there we go.
It does actually show that maybe perhaps being the bad guy does pay off in the end.
Yes, I mean, exactly, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, he's a very bad, as in it's bad when he walks through your door and isn't your friend. And I'm not sure that Steinar has much time for friends, but you know, he is, as Giles, our writer, says, he is just doing what Vikings did. That's their way, the way of the sword. And when he sees that Gripper Hearthhugger, that rather disparaging nickname he has for his former boss, I suppose, his liege jarl, or if that's the phrase it's called, but he takes matters into his own hands, pretty ruthlessly. But it's a ruthless time, 802 AD. So yeah.
Well, to clarify for viewers who haven't heard yet about this wonderful Viking-Age game that has been out for a couple of months now, it's called Norse Oath of Blood, and it has got the whole narrative arc written by the very talented Skald and distant acquaintance of mine and long-term lifelong fan of Giles Christian, who I absolutely adore his books, Raven Blood Eye trilogy and the Sigurd the Lucky trilogy. And if you want to play the game, I also recommend reading Sigurd the Lucky trilogy, because there's a strong parallel but equally a lot of distinctiveness to it. And as George has delightfully explained, the game starts off with Vikings killing Vikings, basically. It's not
Yes,
Vikings
indeed.
invading the Picts or the Anglo-Saxons or the Normans or the Franks. It just shows how that their own quarrels, because they quarrelled as much as the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms did, basically, which I think is a really refreshing take for a Viking game to take. So I suppose we should start at the beginning and ask how you first got involved, George.
Well, so how I first got involved is there's a bit of a, deep in the annals of the sagas kind of element to it, because the shorthand is that a friend of mine and colleague of mine, Hannah Douglas, who I've known for many years, who's a very talented actor, heard they were on the lookout for someone. But the slightly longer story is that about 12 years ago, I was auditioning for a theatre tour in Lincoln, and it was there were 3 different companies going out. We were auditioning for all sorts of things like The Jungle Book. There was a Sherlock Holmes, Sense and Sensibility, Wuthering Heights, various other things. And so everyone, this is before COVID and kind of before self-tapes, which are self-tape auditions are often how we start the auditioning process these days. So a friend of mine and I went up to Lincoln, where this company Chapter House is based, and it was very sort of I'm not sure how many Vikings made it to Lincoln, but I'm sure there were some, 'cause it has that look of a rather fortified city as it was. And
Yes.
so we'd get there on the train, then we'd hike our way up the hill. But we went to audition in this, literally a chapter house, this old sort of monastic sort of building. And there were loads of actors coming in and out, and obviously the directors, and writers, and whoever was on the panel had been at it for hours. But Lincoln was very difficult to get to, and so at the time I got up there, I'd learnt a classical and contemporary speech, and I'd learnt a song, which I won't do for you because I don't want to inflict that sort of punishment on you. But the classical speech I'd got was was a character who I feel probably should crop up in another Norse game of some sort, called Philip the Bastard from King John, which is a rather obscure Shakespeare play. And an old friend of mine had said, this is a good speech. And basically, Philip is this sort of knight. I think he might have been the bastard son of a prince or something. And the speech starts, "Mad world, mad kings, mad composition." Basically, something that very much resonates with me today. Why am I being a good guy, being on the side of right, when all these kings and princes and bishops and everybody are corrupt and avaricious and going for it? So I get up into this audition hall, and there are 4 people on the panel ahead of me, and it's quite a big sort of hall, very Viking-esque. And there are 2 women and 2 men, and the 2 women are looking very attentively, very politely. That was Beck Gadsby and Laura Turner, the writer of some of the or the adapter to theatre of things like Wuthering Heights. And then there were 2 men, and one of the men was sort of staring into space, and another one was on his phone. And I had spent a lot of time getting up to Lincoln, learning these things, calling an old director friend of mine, and he's like going, "So your song, what are you doing?" It's like, "I thought I'd do King Louis. I want to be like you." And he's like, "Yes, maybe make it evil." I'm like, "Yeah, let's do that. An evil orangutan. That'll be great." So I get up there, and half of them don't seem bloody interested. And as an actor, certainly at that age, you're like, "Oh, thank you so much for even seeing me. It's so kind of you." So, but I was so pissed off that I did the first lines I just did there, and then I stopped. I didn't break character, but I stopped. I went, "Mad kings, mad world, mad composition," and then stared into this panel of people, 50% of which were away with the fairies. And the gent who was staring into space kind of went, "Oh, okay, all right, yeah, something's going on." And then the one looking at his phone was going, "Oh, why is it all quiet? I don't understand. Oh God!" And I was staring and eyeballing right at him. And that 4th person was Phil Stevens, the director of Norse, who I would
Oh, yes.
then go on to be. He directed Hannah in one of those companies, and I was directed by Beck or Rebecca Gadsby in Sense and Sensibility and Wuthering Heights. Slightly different character for Sense and Sensibility. I played Willoughby, very nice sort of dashing gentleman. But then actually in Wuthering Heights, I did play Hindley Earnshaw, Heathcliff's older brother, who's like goes off and kills a horse with a whip. Not by whipping it, but by strangling it. So he was a bit of a heavy duty kind of fellow. He was a bastard. He was a real bastard, a Yorkshire bastard. So then when Hannah, what was it, maybe 8 to 9 years later, heard Phil and Giles and the team at Arctic Hazard going, "We need a villain. I think we need a bastard." And Hannah went, "I think I know somebody." And that is how I got involved with Norse, Oath of Blood.
Oh, that is a wonderful story, and I'm so glad that you got to share that with me and our listeners.
Thank you for the patience, because it goes quite round the houses, literally around the counties, but it is true.
It's a remarkable thing, because I think it does often show it's not always what you know, it's who you know.
Well, I always hear this, and I think it's always also who you get to know. Like, I didn't know anyone. I didn't know Hannah. I didn't know Phil or Laura or Beck or anybody until I got myself into the industry. I met Hannah way back, but it was still doing theatre that I met her. So I do push back on that slightly, not on you, but like the idea, because people often default to that, and it's like, well, I didn't know anybody, but you do get to know someone, and I think experiences like that make you. They steal you a little bit, and it was formative. And I realized that you could, because the only reason I did it was because I was so pissed off that I'd traveled so far, they weren't paying attention. And then I realized I could do this every time. I haven't, but there was certainly a turn. I think that may have been why I got Hindley. He's like, why are you not paying attention to me, you bastard? Anyway, so yeah, that's the origin story of Steinar and my involvement in Norse.
Oh, well, that's remarkable because I have had the pleasure of meeting Phil once, I think, and I think it was at a Jorvik Viking festival that Giles Christine came to, because I'm a lifelong fan. I've been following him for many years, probably too much, you might say. But I also know that Phil.
I do adore Phil. I hope he doesn't think I'm giving him a ticking off, because it was a very formative experience, and he has proved himself time and time again as an excellent director and collaborator. And as a wonderful actor in Norse, because he plays Arn, the great advisor to Gripper, and he does indeed. Yes, he plays Arn, and Giles wrote a lovely short story, which is an audiobook narrated by Phil himself.
Yes.
And there's a great little, I forget the name of it. You probably have that. You probably know this. I forget the name, but it's absolutely wonderful. I listened to it recently, and there is a point where it's a prequel, and there's is it a ring? I think Ragnhild, Gripper's wife, gives Gripper a ring. And
it's a brooch. I've got a feeling it's a brooch.
It's a brooch. You're right. You're absolutely right. You know your stuff. You're wise.
It's been a while since I listened to it, but I listened to it not long after it came out. But yes, Phil has narrated all of Giles's works. I don't think there's anyone else who has touched Giles's words, because Phil just brings such a life to it.
He does, absolutely. And I listened to it, and it was so extraordinary to hear Gripper and Arn and Steinar running around in sort of treason, I suppose, or betrayal, I'd say, rather, days. And I like to think that when Phil gives Steinar quite a hoarse voice, I think he was going on some of the stuff that I popped into to Steinar's character. But you'd have to ask him, and I adore him. So Phil, if you're listening, and I bloody hope you are, I love you. And it was a long time ago, and thank you anyway, because I don't know if I would have been any of those without you.
Oh, well, we owe them both a lot of gratitude, because they're both heavily involved in Norse Oath of Blood, are they not? They're almost like thick as thieves. You can't have, it's like Sherlock Holmes. You can't have one without the other.
It was wonderful watching them and I know we're going to come and talk about the mocap process, but it's an extraordinary sort of thing, because it's in this studio, and it's quite black and technical, and there's all machinery and lights and what have you. And I think when we first started shooting, it was quite chilly. I think it might have been February or something. So we were at Target 3D, these wonderful studios in London, and everyone's in sort of like outdoor anoraks, because there's so much equipment. You don't want to put the heating on, because it might really heat up. But then in the morning, it's quite chilly. So I'm there in basically sort of a ice skater's leotard with bobbles on it. And Phil and Giles and others are in the corner. And then when there's a sort of question about script or something, Phil and I will chat, and maybe Giles will come over, and it feels almost indecent. I'm there like a ballerina, just going, what do we think? And they're giving wonderful suggestions, and we're tweaking lines or talking about movements and stuff. And I'm like, right, just please don't look at my crotch, because it's leaving very little to the imagination at the moment.
I'm sure you're all grown up about it enough, despite any banter that might have been on.
We're very mature. We're very mature. You don't believe me, do you?
No, maybe because I've got a sneaky suspicion of what Giles and Phil might actually be like, kind of like when the camera's not rolling, and when they're
they're great collaborators. In all seriousness, as well as being lots of fun, they're really great collaborators. I mean, I've been saying this a lot recently, but Norse is a career highlight. Steinar and characters. When I recorded Slaver Boss, one of the other characters, he was just called Slaver Boss. And then I saw a clip of him, and the dialogue has the magnificent name of Bergir the Bastard. And I'm like, excellent. I'll take that. An alliteration and a phrase fond to my... I'm going to see how many times I mentioned bastard here, and see if I can give Sharp a run for his money. But there we go.
No, you'll be fine. Because I remember having another guest on who was talking about the issue of rape in Vikings, because he wrote a children's book, and him and his wife had a big discussion about, do we even suggest anything like that? Because they touched on slavery, but they didn't touch on that other side. But that brought in a whole other debate.
Yes,
But no,
absolutely.
you'll be fine. You'll be fine. Don't worry. We've
I've
got
got
an
to, I've
adult
got
home
to.
space in Valhalla. Freya has
Excellent.
children. Odin has all the adults.
Excellent, excellent. I have a very off-color story about that. It is quite funny, but it's not mine. It's an Irish comedian, Andrew Maxwell. But maybe we'll save that for the end and just nudge me about the off-color joke because it's funny, but it might lose us a few listeners. But we'll see.
We shall see. Okay, so Phil, of course, then remembered you, or at least Hannah reminded Phil of your wonderful
Yeah, I think
talent.
we've been in each other's orbits a fair bit. You know, sort of occasionally saying hello, and we'd worked. We weren't in the same cast, but we were in the same company with Chapter House. So we were,
Mm,
we knew each other socially, and we had seen each other's work. So that was a nice touchstone
mm,
for us when we came to do this.
mm. So, was it Phil himself who got in contact with you to say, "Can you come and be our bad guy," or did you get contact
That's a
from
very
someone else
good
on the
question.
team? Did you have an audition?
I think it must have been Phil. Yes, I think.
Mm,
I wonder if Hannah mentioned it or mentioned I get in touch. Do you know? I honestly can't remember. It's been some years now because we did it in fits and
mm,
starts. So we would. I think they were definitely already working on it before Steinar
mhm.
went in. I think Hannah mentioned it either to me and or to Phil, and then I sent in a self-tape audition.
Ah, very good.
And I looked back at it recently because I've still got it. And I auditioned for Gripper as well. So I auditioned for the man that I
Ah,
eventually slew. And my trick, which everyone laughed at me about at the time, I have these. In fact, let me just bear with me 3 seconds.
no
I'll
worries.
get it. Okay, I'll show you
No
what I did
worries.
for my self tape. Now I don't know.
Oh, go on then.
Will there be video for this? I'll explain what's happening in a second. So just
Yes,
bear with me for a moment.
no worries.
Okay. So what I did for my self-tape, being a bit creative, I
Mhm.
have this sheepskin rug, which I have by my bed. So when I get out of bed in the morning, I have the lovely woolen feel. And for those of you watching, you can see, and this isn't really Steinar's accent actually, but still, I'm just doing it. You can see now I'm suddenly
Mm,
hugely hairy. So I did that with a lot of like, you must, a lot of finger work, kind of like, yeah, it's
okay.
interesting. And so it added a certain gravitas because I mean, a t-shirt doesn't really do it for a Viking lord or warlord. So if I
Mm,
keep this on in my little home studio where we're recording at the moment, I will get heat exhaustion. So I'm going to take it off. But you have now seen what Phil and the Arctic Hazard team saw when I auditioned. So utter madness, but as they say, the distance between insanity and genius is measured only by success.
Well, I salute you for doing that, sir. And I think it's always those little extra touches, that extra mile that people go to that get them noticed.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I became an actor to, shout in the evening and play dress up. So, I mean, it was work. I was having fun, and it turned out other people were as well.
It's just a shame that obviously with it being a motion capture for a game, you couldn't actually then wear a proper sheepskin and get the whole armour and get the proper look down.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I mean, who knows? The live action Norse. Let's hope.
Now I know Giles has been working with Arctic Hazard and Phil on this game for at least 6 years, because I remember even Facebook reminded me a few months recently when he put the first picture up of the title called Norse. I was like, yes, he's going to do a Viking game. Because I know he's had a previous game experience that was not that great. Not his fault, it was more the style of the game called Valnir Rock. It was a very intense survival game where your character literally could die of cold if you hadn't found enough flowers to make string, to make cloth, to make clothes. It
Yeah,
was that
I've
kind
played a
of
few games like that. I
intensive.
haven't played that one, but I know that feeling of like, why can't I find the thing that I need to
Yes.
survive?
I ran into a bear, and then that didn't went well because I didn't have any weapons.
Yeah, there's a
So it
zombie
kind of
survival
frustrated
game.
me. That,
There's a zombie survival game called DayZ, which is very similar. You'll be just going like nurturing your little sapling of a character, like come on, you can do it. And then you either encounter zombies, wolves, bears, or at worst, other players who have just going, look, there's a living being. Let us stop that being a living being. So I'm
mm,
familiar with that survival, that ruthlessness. Steinar would approve, but I'm not as keen.
mm. Well, yes. So I'm glad that Giles finally found a game and a studio that really appreciated and completely utilised his remarkable Skaldic talent, and it had even more superpowers with Phil's direction and talent. Because, as I've mentioned, dear viewers and listeners, he narrates all Giles Christian's books, and he does an amazing job in all of them. Whether it's the kind of like the Lancelot and Arthur and Guinevere series that he's also written, or of course his many Viking books, and he's even got a few other books. Oh yes, I think he might have narrated When Blood Runs Cold as well, if that came out as an audiobook. That was Giles's one kind of like foray to kind of like modern crime thriller set in Arctic Norway, I think. But anyway, I digress. So you've got the part of Steinar. Do you obviously, is it a while then before you see the script? Do you get bits of the script come through to you? Do you know what do you do odd bits of scenes and then they put it all together, or do you do it from start to finish?
Well, I mean, we didn't do it continuously from start to finish. But again, I think it's been about 3 years since we did, maybe not quite that long, but it came in fits and starts. So we do about, I mean, I think they were working on it for longer. I think I was in the second wave of people. I think they did a few concept things with Hannah and the core cast to start with. And then, as things get a bit more serious, I was brought in to make that get more serious, I suppose, or to be the harbinger of that. So I get that. I seem to remember it didn't take long from the sheepskin toting self-tape before there was a confirmation and then going in. I think one of the wonderful things that Phil did, and I'm not just trying to butter him up after sort of ticking him off earlier, is that a very rare thing, which I really appreciate, and I think it comes from that theatre company's sort of chapter house background that we all had, was that he got a lot of actors he knew, and several of us knew each other. Some from chapter house, some brought in from other things. And so we would multi-role occasionally, and that's the beauty of mocap. You can sort of do various things, and then if one, I play the one of the wolf. What did we say they were called? Not fundamentalists.
Wolves of Fenrir, I believe.
Wolves of Fenrir, yes, and it was so much fun to sort of, you pitch your voice somewhere different. So if Steinar is up here and he's very much saying something like this, if he's trying to menace you, then Bergir the bastard, he's very much here. He's got something like he's a schemer. He's greedy, unlike Steinar, who likes battle. But then you have Fenrir followers like this, so he's so absolutely fervent that he will kill for the great mighty wolf. So there's a chance to stretch your acting muscles in different directions, which you very rarely get in film and TV. Not entirely avoiding it in film and TV, but you sometimes get in voiceover. But then with the ability to play it physically, you get loads of chances to play. And I think the fact that everyone at Target 3D, but led by Phil, great shout out to Ryan Mercier, who is I don't know what his exact title is, but he's the actor wrangler at Target 3D. Now, I've known Ryan for years through the Met Film School at Ealing Studios, but he's a very talented man, and he was sort of the conduit between the technical people at Target 3D, who are absolute geniuses, but their number one expertise may not be telling actors what, translating basically what they're doing and what that means we need to do. So that was a really nice touch. You had a go-between, so which meant that Phil could actually focus on the bigger picture, literally and figuratively, and the story and such, so that we had a company. We had a sort of, even if you snuffed it, you knew you might get another chance to have a go. And so I think, yeah, that was it. And then when I was confirmed as Steinar, it's pretty clear from the script. The first time you see him, he arrives on the dock, on the wharf, and there's this sort of really, you can tell that poor old Gripper thinks it's like, you can tell he's like the little brother that he never had. He's like, oh, he's back at last. Where's he been? I thought you must have found yourself a woman in Haddingedal. And Steinar's like, more than one woman. It's like, okay, all right, showing off a little bit. And then there's this whole sort of chat about ships and ale, and and then it all kicks off, and there's no time wasted. It's really effective storytelling. You get a sense of the history of these men, and then the brutal tragedy of the betrayal. But I am the actor that plays Steinar, and one of my core tenets as an actor, which actually I learned in Russia when I did a 2-week course in Moscow, which is not something you can really easily do these days. But and they said play a character of someone you know, and so I did this sort of adopted sibling of mine who I was not hugely fond of at the time, and made him very grotesque and sort of rather all that. And Sergey, our Moscow acting tutor, via a translator, actually no, I understood this bit because he just went, "Niet." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I'm pretty sure I know what that means. And he went and he told through the translator, he said, "You don't like your character." And I was like, "That's true." And then he sort of burbled away, and what came out, and his translator said, "You must always be your character's lawyer." And this is the thing, you don't have to agree with them. You are their lawyer, so you are there to bat for them. If someone comes at you with one thing, it's like we have a wonderful line again with Phil, using one of his other talents as a great actor, as Arn, saying, "You swore an oath to protect Grippa, to protect Bora. You betrayed us." And Steinar counters with saying, "You are no fool, Arn. You know that Grippa was weak. I had to put him down. Bora is stronger because of it, because of me." And then you suddenly get into a world where you're like, hang on, what is this? This is a world where Vikings or Danes or whatever you want to call them, they set sail in their ships to pick on others, because they can't farm like the Saxons in England or the Irish or the Picts or the Scots can, because their country's too mountainous. So they have to go out and raid. It's a predator sort of thing. And it's not, we add our own morals of today and Christianity and all this, that, and the other at our peril, because it's just not how the world worked. It was, the law of survival. And Steinar is, if you think of him just as a moronic killing machine and someone who just betrays everything, I think you miss the point, because he knows how to build alliances. He goes off as the sort of lieutenant, the prowman of Grippa, to Haka, to Jarl Haka, played by my great friend Marcus, who's absolutely wonderful in it, who doesn't look at all like him, I hasten to add. He's the sweetest looking guy. And then I saw him in that, and I was like, oh dear, he's terribly ugly. So he did brilliantly, and he was doing this voice, and I remember on the day I was like, crikey, your great grandmother was a toilet. And he's going, yeah. And then you see the creation that everyone at Target 3D and Arctic hasn't made. And you're like, he was right, I was wrong. So to have that confidence as an actor and as a director in your actor is marvelous. So Steinar knows how to build alliances, how to fight. He's very good at fight. He charges. He's very much a, I was about to say attack first and ask questions and think later. It's not that at all. He just he sees a gap in the enemy, in an opportunity, and he lunges for it. And when he does it, he's ruthless. He doesn't, there's a point, I think you may have seen the cutscene where our dear director of photography, Stuart, has a lovely little cameo as I think the last warrior standing between Steinar and Grippa, wounded Grippa. And he says, Steinar and his men club their way through the doors and slaughter all the poor bondsmen and such, or the I don't know what the equivalent of a huskar is in these bodyguards, basically. And Steinar says, Gripper is mine. Bring the girl to me. Kill the rest. And then poor old Stuart says, not while I live, Steinar. Turns his head and goes, out the back, go. And he buys their escape with his life, because in that instant, Steinar just grabs a spear from Haka and flings it through the poor guy. And he's like, it's like, fair enough. Not while you live. Well, then we'll just deal with that. And
yes.
And just a little note on that. I saw the trailer, and I saw a bit where a character and we didn't know what they looked like, because obviously they don't immediately look like you when they're off in the distance. And this character walks through a hall, and there's a poor man kneeling on the ground and just swipes his head off with the sword, and then whirls the sword around in a sort of windmill. And I went, "Oh, that's cool. I would do that if I was doing that." And then I had what alcoholics refer to as a moment of clarity. It was like, I did do that. That's me. And because I did ask, because I'd thrown the spear through poor old Stuart, this wonderful brave man, and I remember asking Phil, could I cut his head off as well? You know, who's to say that they did? I mean, this warrior addressed him by name, so they probably knew each other, and it was just like, maybe he's. I mean, I'm now really riffing on the Viking idea, but
Go for it. That's what we're here for.
Stuart's character is gripping the spear that's through him as he sinks to his knees. So Steinar, I'm being my character's lawyer, because Steinar beheads him whilst he's still holding a weapon. Now it might be the one that killed him, but maybe that means he gets through into Valhalla. Who knows? Or Valhall, as I was corrected many times.
He didn't let him suffer, I suppose.
Well, exactly. Exactly. Well, there you go. So there's a certain, there's a grayness there. He's ruthless, but he's a clever man, and he's a deadly operator, which is so much fun to play.
I would like to add completely on that, because I completely agree with you that so many people, especially when they think of Vikings today, often forget how ruthless and brutal they were to themselves before they even touched on Francia or Anglo-Saxon or bothered anyone else around Europe or even Iceland, because I could quote how Eric Bloodaxe, of course, was famous or infamous for killing so many of his brothers off.
Yeah, well, there's a clue in the name, I suppose.
Yeah.
I knew him when he was just Eric.
Even Harald Hardrada, his eldest brother, was killed off in battle because Norway and Denmark, I think, or it's Norway, Denmark, and Sweden. One of those three, they're always feuding. Basically, they're always fighting over each other. I'm glad
you're not certain, because I know it's like, yes, that one of those things happened.
One of the two. I just know that Harald's brother was made a Saint Olaf after he died, but I can't quite remember which nationality killed him off.
Yes, I think
because of course they weren't they were kind of there, but they were still trying to find themselves and concrete themselves
in the same way. And the Vikings sort of made quite, the idea of empires and countries is a bit vague when it's like, are you in charge of this country? Well, we've killed everybody, so kind of, it's a little bit vague. So, and yes, absolutely, you get these hardened warriors, they've trained against each other, and so then they arrive at on the green and pleasant shores of England, or the various Anglo-Saxon kingdoms as they were, and it's kind of like adding a shark into a little goldfish pond. You're just like, oh, well, this is much easier, guys. Everybody calm down. I've got a great idea. Over the sea, follow me.
Yes, I mean that's what the great heathen army did with the three famous brothers, Ivar, Ragnar, and Uber.
Oh yes, absolutely magnificent.
Although I think it might have been, or maybe it was Halfdan. I always get their names mixed up. But one of them, and I know this only from watching kind of like the epic. Well, I call it epics. I enjoyed it. The Last Kingdom series. And of course,
I love the Last Kingdom. Uhtred, son of Uhtred.
Yes. I mean, one of them did, of course, convert to Christianity, but that's how clever the Vikings were, and I think that reflects, of course, Steinar Far-Spear's clever strategy in his mind, because the Vikings there's so many anecdotes of them converting in order just to get access to trade routes or to kind of like be allowed into one capital or another without having to fight their way in.
They're very pragmatic. I remember again in the Last Kingdom who played? Is it the last king of East Anglia? And he's tied. They basically recreate Saint Sebastian, and they say, "Well, I believe in God, so the Lord will stop the arrows." And
yes.
And one of them goes, "Really?" And he's like, "Yes." And he's like, "Okay." Tries it. He's like,
"Yes."
Didn't work.
Proves it.
No. Just like, okay. So yes. Anyway, we as ever digress.
Oh, it's all Viking talk, and that's always welcome in my virtual house.
Excellent.
So, as you explained, you came in at a different point to maybe the other cast members, because there's a great epic cast, and I haven't met them all yet. I've only played a small portion of the game. I've heard it takes a good 20 or so hours, depending on how people play, because there's three ways of playing it. There's like an easy version, a narrative version, or the hard version. I went for the easy/narrative version because I'm rubbish at blocking. In any game that gives me a block button, I can never press it in quick enough. I'm like one of those people that likes to hit from afar with an arrow or hide and cast with spells.
Yeah, I think you're not just. I mean, apart from the cast with spells and arrows things, I think you're like Steinar. He's not much one for blocking. He goes in hammering rather than He's very much the best form of defense is a good offense sort of chap. I don't think I've ever described Steinar as a chap. I'm not sure he'd appreciate it. But he would if it got him into the good graces of someone powerful that he could then make use of. So you may call me a chap if you wish.
So in terms of Steinar's narrative and therefore your performance, did you therefore, I presume, do it from kind of like a linear set of rehearsals, or were you doing one bit and then like, okay, we're going back a few days, weeks/months in the game, we're doing this bit now?
We did do some rehearsals. There was a lovely house not far from the studios, I think, and we rehearsed a bit, I think maybe a day or two before, which is a real privilege because on screen and voiceover, it's almost unheard of. So we got a chance to find the characters. I think I definitely, I grew into Steinar. As I remember it, there were two major batches because obviously we're all playing various other characters as well. But Steinar starts, breathing fire, as it were, and being absolutely ruthless. But then you have this Jarl meet, which is when all of the lords and jarls and whoever else gather around. I'm not sure where it comes in the game, but I think it's about halfway. I guess it's about sort of a quarter or halfway through. And this is Jarl Eivor, who my pal Andre plays with great effect. And he's trying to summon all of these Jarls to have a great raiding mission across the sea. And eventually he'll join Gripper, most foolishly, to try and take down Steinar. So we have this Jarl meet, and the last to arrive are Steinar and Haka. And they, Jarl Eivor says, I want no trouble in my hall. And then Gripper is saying, why would I cause trouble? And then Steinar arrives saying, because he thinks you're going to cut my throat. And so then Gripper goes, no, Gripper, Freudian slip. Gunnar, his son, seeking vengeance, the oath of blood itself, is very, very angry, and they're all furious. But Steinar is not. Steinar is not a wild animal. He walks in and says, you will have no trouble from me. And he and Hauke join the discussion. And then he turns it back, and it shows that he isn't just your typical, blockheaded monster villain. He wins, in my opinion at least, he works to win over the other Jarls against Gunnar, because this is a Jarl meet. And he says, why are you here, Gunnar? You are no Jarl. You are a farmer working some shithole spit of land that your uncle gave you. And he says also, I took Gripper's high seat by the sword, as is our way. And you're like, and you can imagine the other Jarls, they're going, yeah, that's how we do it. We don't particularly approve of a gift, a Nepo baby, if you will, a Viking Nepo baby, or Nepo nephew. What's this guy doing here? Just because he had a dead father. So, and it's insidious because you see that Jarl Egil, Gunnar's uncle, played by also award-winning, the wonderful Anthony Hewson, or Ant, as I voiced by Ant is his Instagram handle, and I recommend all go and follow him because he's absolutely brilliant. He realizes that this is not going their way. He says, peace, nephew, this is neither the time nor the place. And a little shout out to the fact that when I say, oh, your sister is not dead, so Hauke, is she still keeping your bed warm? And Ant just does this. And I didn't see it on the day in the room. I didn't hear it. But because of mocap, because of all the equipment you're wearing that captures every motion, every sound, Ant just did this. And you can see this incredibly clever political operator, like a Game of Thrones character, really, really holding himself back. He's like, oh, they're talking about my sister being in bed with that of horrible toilet descendant man over there. And it's very clever. It's not just block-headed break skulls, which the Saxons may have thought of the Vikings. It's strategic. It's and it's blooming brilliant fun to play. And again, brilliantly written by Giles, so loads of fun.
It is. I mean, that thank you for giving us that wonderful performance, because
Thank
of
you.
course that was the wonderful entry that got you your wonderful
That
award.
was, yes, absolutely. That's why I know it so well, because I've been seeing that in one form or another. So yes. But no, I mean, genuinely joyous to play. Also, that scene, I do recommend, even if you don't have time to play the game, do go and look up the Jarl meet from Norse Oath of Blood, because it's the biggest motion capture scene I've ever been involved in. There must have been.
Really?
Yeah, there was. So I think, now that I think about it, I'm trying to think, we had Stuart again, our director of photography, was one of the he's the character who goes, if we sail west, I should lead. And then Steinar just goes, a warrior should lead. I have fought more battles than you, Jarl. And I forget his Jarl's name. But then there's another character who says, no, I won't do it. And that is the wonderful director of Arctic Hazard itself.
Oh.
Now, I don't think I'm pronouncing his name right. I know it's shameful, but Terj.
I was going to say Terje, so we were both
Terje,
close.
yeah, let's say Terje. Terje, and who is magnificent and the most lovely man. And I know that I pronounced his name wrong, so forgive me. I've been reading it too much rather than actually being in the room with him. But so he's there, and then you have the lovely Bryony, who I think she plays a sorcerer as well somewhere else. She's the female Jarl, and then Phil's there as Arn. And it was joyous, because it was like being in a huge film set. I mean, it wasn't a huge film. It was a huge film set, except for the fact that we're all wearing these sort of leotards and all trying to avoid looking at each other's bits and pieces, because they're not leaving much to the imagination. But that's the key, the imagination. You sort of the skill of the actors and the environment that Target 3D and Phil and Ryan and everybody created. And then the wonderful writing, you feel right in place. I mean, I'm looking at your wonderful background. I'm saying wonderful a lot, but it is all rather wonderful. And
Thank you.
it's it feels like that. You don't have too much trouble. Once you click into it, at least for me, you're committed. Everyone else is committing to the bit, as they say, and then the results fill it all in. And I was mesmerized, and I had so much fun, and I can't wait to be involved in whatever they do next, if they'll have me. So.
Well, I always kind of like admire actors of any talent, because having got my own little girl of 5.5 going on 15 for the levels of Saturday gives, sometimes when I'm reading bedtime stories, I'll try and put on voices, and I think the most I can do is kind of like a little old lady, or kind of like a very stereotyped, almost like West Country farmer. And I have DM'd
Both valid choices.
a dungeon master for a couple of sessions for a group of friends, and again, I cannot do voices to save my life. Cannot. So kind of like just acting, let alone doing the voice acting, is a remarkable talent. But the thing that I really respect and admire about you and all the colleagues, kind of like in everyone, not just involved in this game, but just anyone, anything I've ever enjoyed, is really the amount of imagination and the power of that comes with that enables you to really live and embody and be immersive in that moment. Because I did theatre studies at A level. So we read a lot of Russian Chomsky and the kind of like theatre of the mind and all that deep, deep, deep stuff. But a lot of it, I think, is like you just got to pretend. And pretending is such a natural talent that I think as humans have, especially when you partner with great storytelling. And when you've got Giles's epic writing, I mean,
it's so much fun.
His lines for kind of like villains such as Steinar, but also kind of like the heroes, the heroines, and the boulders and the other bad guys that come associated, like the bastard, the bastard guy, kind of like, we'll get some money for these fuckers once they're all dead.
Oh,
if any of them are alive.
Exactly.
I didn't quite paraphrase it perfectly, but I can just about remember.
You were pretty close.
Because I can remember when a few people started streaming clips of the game coming out, and I think I was able to play a few of the beta/alpha phases of it when they were still getting it ramped up. And they put you kind of just where Gunnar and his sister have got their new land to try and rebuild themselves literally from scratch. And they come across the seamstress and her husband, the farmer. And I have to say, if that doesn't dispel the myth of Vikings being absolute blockheads and just men wandering around with swords, then I don't know what will, because it brings the kind of like typical cat-like feral woman sass.
Oh yeah.
So a quivering man who just doesn't have quite the what's it called, like spear, the spear to stand up to her, kind of thing.
It
And
takes
the
all sorts to make
innuendos,
a world.
the innuendos just absolutely just kept me laughing. And I remember seeing a clip from another woman who streamed it. I think she was in Europe somewhere, but it's a scene that I haven't got to yet, but I can't wait. But I'm going to spoil it for people anyway because it's just hilarious. It's where they come across this guy who claims to be kind of like a great romantic type Skald type person and has had his way with the women. And then he goes, actually, I'm actually being held hostage by this other woman who's an absolute ogre, an absolute troll. Can you please kill her for me? And they kind of like don't believe it. And then she comes out, and it's like that scene from one of those Hitchcock horror films where she kind
Oh
of like
yes.
makes the poor guy stay behind and write, and he's chained to the
Oh
chair.
yes,
And
like
like,
Misery, like Kathy.
oh,
Yeah, poor
that's
old
it, Misery. I
Kathy
can never
Burke.
remember the name. I can never
Oh,
remember
it's
the name, but
it's tattooed in my memory. But yeah, no, I've seen that as well. I wasn't involved. I would like to say that was me. I was the lady, but it wasn't. But I have seen the clip, and it is. I was a shock because it didn't figure much in Steinar's plot line, and then I saw it. I was like, bloody hell! No, it's well. I think the important thing is not to take. It's important to that the characters take it seriously, but the world can be funny and strange and rather, bizarre. I mean, it's not an easy thing to write that sort of material, but Giles does it brilliantly, and yeah, the cast were fantastic. I don't actually know who played the ogre lady, but I shall have to inquire.
oh well, I
Or maybe
think
it's a bit
both.
risky. Maybe I'll leave it well alone. I don't know what happened to me. Even Steinar.
Well, I think it's just a fine one of many fine examples, and I'm sure I'll discover more as I play the full game in good time with life and work and having a second baby on the way.
All in good time.
All in good time. Just shows that Giles, I think, is one of those authors that definitely kind of like brings any historical period really to a relatable, deeply human level, in that we
Absolutely.
can see aspects of ourselves. Like we know whole human husbands and wives often have that kind of like power balance of
Yes,
struggle, argument, sometimes comical, sometimes not.
absolutely.
And it just the fact that it can make us laugh and see ourselves in them, I think is wonderful. And of course, you perform Steinar wonderfully. I'm sure I will see more of him as I can't wait to play the
I
game.
look forward to it.
But I know you've kind of like mentioned you were the Slaver guy, and then you were the Wolf of Fenrir guy. Were there any other roles that you might be able to tell
I
us about?
think there were. I think those were the main three that I recall. There were others. There was a lot of. It's a career trait of mine that I play the guy who dies well quite frequently. So a lot of.
Ah,
I think I don't. I've seen the motion capture behind the scene footage of me sneaking in to try and murder. I suppose it might have been Gunnar and Sigrid, because those were the actors that were playing it. So they think that I think my character, the assassin, thinks that he's got them banged to rights, and then they turn the tables on him and dispose of me. But no, it was after a while there was a lot of Steinar to be done. So he was the one that really it was the meat of my performance in that. He was yeah. I mean, he's wonderful to play, but I mean, there was something frightening because he's almost sort of madly focused. But I mean, obviously, the idea is that for the game to conclude, he must fail because he's the big bad who set the whole thing in motion. But it's one of these things where you have to be pretty good to make sure he does, because he's covered a lot, and I think he really enjoys the Viking life as well. He's not just doing it because like it must be done and I'm afraid. He's just like, I think he's sort of, I mean, it fits very much with the game narrative. I think he'd be at home, maybe a little bit in a little darker version, but he'd be at home with Gimli and Legolas in the Lord of the Rings, counting the number of kills he's got. I think he'd enjoy that. If he, I think he's maybe not quite as simplistic as that, but I think he would definitely enjoy others talking about him having Steinar slay this person and that person, and I think it really sticks in his craw when I think it is Ant again as Jarl is it Ava? No, Egil, Jarl Egil, who says that you should be Steinar Hidden Blade because of how he betrayed Gripper, and I think that really pisses him off. He's really angry about that. So he's I think he's quite prepared to do it all himself. Like
Mm.
his allies are being picked off and his men are being slain. He's like, fine. He sits in in the last scene, he sits in his throne when 4 of them come in and he's like, I'll crack your skull and use your
Mm.
brains to grease my sword. And he means it.
Mm. Well, speaking of endings, and I know this might be slightly spoiler territory, but as kind of like many players find with some, especially kind of like this kind of, it's not quite a true role-playing game, but it's definitely narrative-driven. It's the most narrative-driven Viking game I've come across for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too.
And I'm not really touching on Assassin's Creed Valhalla because that jumps around with so much genres and things altogether. And I haven't completed that game either.
No, nor me. I did play it and I was doing a lot of fetch and carry, so I recommend Norse instead. But then I would.
But as you say, he ultimately needs to be defeated one way or the other. But I know the combat in the game is also kind of heavily strategic, very much similar to kind of like it's been described as kind of Vikings meets Baldur's Gate, basically, because it's got kind of that turn-based action. You've got certain action points, certain movability, certain character can do certain things. So obviously, when it came to, I presume, playing, the player becomes Gunnar, and you have to face against Steinar. Did you then have to do a recording for if the player died, and then a recording for if the player won?
Yes. I think the recording of when the player dies is, as you might expect, shorter. There's less of a discussion about it. He's very, very pleased with himself. There's all sorts of lines, and I don't have them all to hand actually, because I haven't got to that point or seen it in the game. But I think there's something about he's keen to take your skull and use it as a bowl for his hounds or something like that, or his singular hound, which I like the idea that Steinar might have a pet that he actually does quite like, even if he's rather odd feeding habits. But the one that stuck with me, and actually one I this is the thing about talking about tinkering on details, and there was a point where I was just doing dozens of trash talking lines. So the idea was that my men were fighting Gunnar's men and Sigrid and co, presumably very well. And Steinar is overseeing his men doing very well as well, apparently. And he's just yelling. I don't know how it comes in the game, but when I was recording it, there were just wonderful lines. And one I changed, I said, here, where it says pull, can I say rip instead? And Giles and Phil talked about it, and we talked about it and said, yes, I think that would work. Then I promptly forgot it and said the line with pull. And Phil said, you wanted to change it? Like, yes, that's right, I did. But I am human. But then he had this wonderfully awful line, which was, I'll rip out your spine and use it to lash my thralls. And you're like, he's thought about this. Or he's a very quick, he's like, this spine, spine I could take. That thrall never gets to the kitchen fast enough. This would solve both problems. And so you have so much to play with. And it's just joy. And I think it's also the language that they might use. I think there was that Skaldic tradition of, I don't mean to be trite and compare it to like rap battles, but there is a certain element of, I am more grand a poet or a skald than you because I can. It's just that Steinar's subject matter is pretty bloody and bone and gristle. I think he's very. He knows what he knows. He's not one for flowers. He knows his anatomy. Or I'm not sure he'd be very good putting it back together, but he knows what to. He's like, that bit. I want to get that bit, and then I'll use that bit for the skull. I can use as a cup. The spine I can use as a whip. He's like the A team. He's the Viking A team. Is our Steinar. So that's okay. I'm clearly losing my mind, but that worked. I mean, he is like I said, I'm his lawyer, so I have to be.
Oh, well, I hope that you do kind of maybe get to play the game yourself and play against yourself.
I do need to. I've got my nephew Sam is very keen to play it, so I might see what he says and if he says, "Oh, it's so enjoyable killing you," I'll go, "Okay, well, this is a journey into my psyche, but let's give it a go." That's the thing. I don't know if I'd enjoy playing as Gunnar. I don't think I'd constantly make him fail, so Steinar could go, "Ha ha ha! I knew you'd fail."
Because kind of like, obviously you've mentioned about how you record lots of what you call as trash lines, as well as kind of like all the motion capture and the physicality of pretending to hit so and so with the sword, throw the spear, cast the arrow. Obviously, the now infamous stabbing scene with Gunnar's dad. So I remember first coming across you on Instagram when that came up via Arctic Hazard and of course Norse. And it showed, which I cleverly didn't realise, kind of like you're not actually holding a physical dagger until a guy behind you passes you it.
Yes.
And I thought that's a really clever trick, because obviously they must move the camera around virtually, but you're not aware of where the camera is when you're
so it's not even that. So I'll let you into a little. We'll do a whistle stop tour of how it actually works. So when you film for mocap or performance capture, motion capture is what it sounds. It is the motion capture. But what we're doing in Norse, for the most part, is performance capture. It's tricky. It's a tricky distinction, and they're often used interchangeably. But we have head-mounted cameras, which are very uncomfortable sometimes, where they are sort of they're popped on your head like a sort of a rugby scrum cap. And but they're sort of like fiberglass or plastic or something, and they're tightened onto your head so that they don't move. Because in front of you, you've got this great big rig. If you imagine like the shape, the sort of frame that you might use to make a puppet for a velociraptor mask. So you have this thing with a phone on the end, which is used as a camera. Now that's used to map your facial expressions. So the facial expressions, to a degree, that you see on the characters' faces are our facial expressions, and there's behind the scenes footage, which Max Brown, one of our wonderful, talented members of the group working on this, has done a lot of, as have many others. And it's capturing everything, and you can see us all. It's a very unflattering angle, but it does map everything. And so you do get this sort of these things that often as actors we don't realize what we're doing. But because they're mapped and it's just got, they've mapped the cheeks, how they move or something, so they'll be able to capture that. And then you have we've joked a little bit about these leotards, but they're not really. They're a lycra material covered in dots. Now you'll notice each performer is wearing a different coloured set of dots. This is to differentiate in the machines. And rather than shooting like a film set where you would have a camera pointing at the action, what that means in film sets is you might have to reshoot if you're trying to get different angles. So you'll do a close-up, maybe a mid-shot, and a wide shot. But with what you have in motion and performance capture, this is why you often do it in a studio. I mean, the technology is evolving all the time, so this may well be out of date before long. But what they have at the moment is something called the volume. So if you imagine a sort of a rectangle or a cube or something in 3 dimensions, but that cube is actually a cube of cameras. So they're on every wall.
Wow.
And so they are, all of them, they're catching you from every angle, and they're mapping the dots. So they'll be capturing the motion. And then the head-mounted cameras will be capturing the expression. And they'll all be, this is where my expertise runs very quickly dry, but they'll all be in the same file, maybe for Steinar, or all kept side by side. There's Steinar's facial expressions for scene 1, and there's his motion for scene 1. So you have this composition of files and technology, which is almost a living, breathing performance. And yes, you can. We do this thing at the beginning and end of every shoot, every take, which is T-pose, which I haven't got room to do it in here, but it's the sort of actor's standard thing. Be a tree. You stand straight and put both arms out. And that is just to sort of map where the beginning and end of the scene is for the volume for the computer. And so what that means is you can have this really theatrical experience where, like in the Jarl meet, we're all sitting around tables and you're not bothered by a camera in your face when you're trying to talk to your nemesis or your former boss's upstart son. You've got the actor right there. The cameras have got it all. So you've all got cameras on your face. Now it does make getting close to another actor facially quite precarious. I've never done a motion capture kissing scene, but I imagine there may have to be some special circumstances. And the other thing, which you've alluded to, is that you can't really have any kit or props on you, attached to you, because it would block the dots. So and then that would interfere with the computer. So what you have, if you look at some of the behind the scenes stuff, is you have weapons but they've got dots as well.
Mm.
And they can also be added and taken away if, for instance, as you mentioned, when Steinar and Grippa meet each other in the inciting incident of the game, which is on the dock, and they walk to each other and go, lovely to see you. Probably not exactly that line, but still. There's Hauker and his warband are doing a pincer movement. They're coming back round the side and they're evading Bora from the village from the other side, creating a distraction that gives Steinar just enough time. Because I imagine he knows Grippa, for all his hearth hugger sort of thing, he doesn't come out and just cut his throat in front of his men. He waits
No.
for the subterfuge. Steinar's good. Steinar's a great warrior, but he's also aware that there's no point taking a chance you don't need to take. And so he pulls the knife. Although, of course, because in the volume, I don't have a knife. So there's an assistant, production assistant or a runner behind me, with a what I seem to remember was sort of like it wasn't quite a banana, but it was a sort of a microphone-esque thing, with dots on it, which became my hidden blade, as Ant would say. And then I drove into poor old Gripper. And then when he crumples to the floor and Arn yells no, I will do the motion of going to reach for my sword, but of course I don't have a sword in a scabbard on my hip. I'm reaching for what I hope is going to be the production assistant putting a sword into my hand, and then we're away to the races and going, kill them, which in the scene, when you watch it, is beautifully slowed down in the cinematic. And this again, actually, to modestly add my contribution beyond just the lines and the character, I said, because and this is the environment that Phil and everybody creates. You have a space to offer suggestions, because that you're not. I remember when I did a broadsword training course, like learning to fight with big swords, and I paid for it because I wanted to get more skills as an actor. And I asked Mark, the instructor, I said, Mark, I just have a question. I didn't quite follow that bit. Could you explain that again? He said, oh, yes, George, absolutely. Kano came over, helped me fix the problem or the stance, whatever it was. And it was amazing because I remember years of being in school and at games practice or whatever and being told things and being too terrified to ask because maybe not terrified, but too like, oh, I can't be bothered because I'll ask and they say, you just don't listen, do you? And now I wasn't this cheeky at the time, but now I'd say, well, you're pretty bad at explaining it, actually. I wonder if you could just do it again and cut out the histrionics and we could all get on with it. But it's amazing what you can get out of people when you're paying them money to do it. So anyway, that sort of environment doesn't happen at all. So what you've got with the team behind Norse is this wonderful, collaborative, encouraging atmosphere. So that's what they want. They want you to, because on film departments and games and what have you, there are all sorts of, on films, there are lots of departments. So you might have the lighting department or the costume or this. And I've always thought that sometimes you're maybe not the head of, but you're the sort of the head of your character's department. So in some ways, along with Giles and Phil, I'm the head of the Steinar department. So I've been thinking about Steinar more than anybody else maybe on this one. I might say that a bit more succinctly if you don't mind. So I would just say that in this case, I would say I'm the head of the Steinar department insofar as I've probably been thinking about him more than anybody else, as opposed to like thinking about Steinar and Grippa and this and the whole world and Bora. So I've been thinking about him for a while. And while everyone else is like, right, I want to see what Phil will be watching the whole scene and Giles will be watching the dialogue. And what I noticed was that once I stabbed Grippa, he sinks to his knees and Arn rushes in to help him and Marcus playing the poor chap who gets the arrow in the eye. So the man who plays Hauker is also the poor guy who says, get the L to the long haul and gets an arrow in the eye. So same chap. And I was aware that Steinar was just standing there. And I was like, well, why doesn't he just go and just, kill him when he's there? And I said, so could I just mime a couple of bodyguards like that they rush to protect him and Steinar finishes them off? And in the volume on the day, I just sort of drew the sword and I still had the knife and yelled, kill them, and sort of swiped, using my imagination, going, and I kill you, sir, and you also, sir, and then I'll get you and I'll ha. And then months, if not years, pass. And it's
Mm.
like the main cinematic. It's at the start of the launch
It
trailer.
is.
It's that,
Mhm.
and it's just it makes you feel so valued as an actor, which sometimes there's this dreadful phrase sometimes used, the talent, which I'm like, well, what are the
Mm.
other people doing then? They seem pretty talented to me. So I rather detest that, because it also makes you feel somewhat other and rather mollycoddled. Whereas when you make a suggestion and they go, yeah, why not? And then it becomes something like that, which everyone enjoys. I mean, it's not me saying, look at the thing I did. It's just me being overjoyed to have made a contribution that, a rising tide carries all boats, and long
Mhm.
ships, I suppose. But that it sort of brings it all together, and it's a joy to be a part of a collaborative process like that. And
Mm.
it was a joy.
Mm. Well, I think that's again a wonderful thing that hopefully should be encouraged more in kind of like all spaces of acting, pretending. Kind of like I know I certainly encounter it a lot in my Dungeons and Dragons game that I play, kind of like that
Mhm.
collaborative storytelling, where kind of like you have someone has a suggestion, they make an action, and then you just deal with the consequences and see what happens.
Absolutely.
Because I think a lot can happen when we do collaborate, especially with storytelling and ideas.
Mm.
And as you're right, I think kind of like any bad guy wouldn't just stand there and let his minions and do all the bloody work and get bloody kind of like Vikings did it.
Yeah,
And people would have rushed to protect the
absolutely.
Jarl and they would have tried to avenge him at the very least. So he would have been attacked at least once.
Exactly. Well, that's maybe why he had to take that moment when Gripper looks
Mm,
away, when the horns sound when there's an attack, because he might not, even though they're right next to each other, if the others hadn't been distracted, maybe he wouldn't have been able to get close. So that
wow.
and then so you sort of see if not a problem, then a kind of a little wrinkle in the story, or in at least the setting up of the combat. You're like, well, I'm right there. Why don't I do it? And then you think, well,
Mm.
why might he not do it? Because of something like that. And then you throw in, and then suddenly oh, it was great fun. I mean, it is, as we've said or alluded to, it is good to be bad.
I guess kind of like to round things off, a few little questions kind of like about you and Vikings more generally. I mean, you've obviously mentioned that you've watched or perhaps read at least Uhtred,
Yes,
the
yes.
Last
I've
Kingdom
I've I've
series.
watched
So
The
did
Last
you have
Kingdom.
an
I've watched Vikings, the series, that was on, what was it? Was it Amazon?
it used to be the History Channel
Yes, that's
originally, and
right.
then
Yes.
Netflix tried to do the sequel
Oh,
series
yes,
Vikings
Valhalla.
Valhalla,
Yeah,
which
yeah, yeah,
was
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
more of
Which
a
I didn't
Doctor Who
catch, but yeah.
high mash because yeah, I saluted them for their kind of like their vision, but it could have just
Odin
stuck with
loves a
one.
trier.
But yeah, so kind of like, have you always had an interest in Vikings and history? And another question, I suppose, kind of like, have you ever read any of Giles's books before you started doing this game?
Well, I'll hold my hands up and say I hadn't read Giles's books beforehand, but I had so much fun playing it that I've got to start, and maybe you can give me a recommendation afterwards about where to start. But in terms of Vikings, in my experience, I I think Vikings were sort of a little bit further down the pecking order to Knights of King Arthur and
Mm.
pirates and cowboys,
Mm.
but only a little way. I mean, they kind of
Mhm.
incorporate. I mean, it's sort of like pirates meets Knights of the Round Table. I mean, they're not a million miles away from that. And I think that sort of swashbuckling,
Mm.
can-do attitude, you might say, or get things done kind of thing, is definitely there with them. I'm trying to think where my first experience with Vikings came from. They were
Mm.
always there in my imagination, and I think,
Mm.
you just knew what they were, and I think very much and maybe I'm wrong, but certainly in my experience in the last sort of 20 years, they've sort of broadened out. I wonder if it might have been something to do with history in the Battle of Hastings, and I don't think I really knew
Mm.
that Vikings had this whole history. Um,
Mm.
that reaches so far back and so wide. I mean, looking at all the stuff that goes on in Ukraine and Russia, the land of the Rus, and all the rest of it,
Mhm.
is amazing. Um, I think it's one of those things where there is something that calls to an adventurous spirit to jump on a ship and go out
Mhm.
with a sword and seek your fortune. So they were never far. They may not have been on the podium, or at least on the top of the podium, but they were always a source of fascination. And I think as I've got older and I've realized how much, I mean, I think unlike some of them, Knights of King Arthur or what have you, and certainly cowboys, I mean, the whole idea of them I think, has been very much inflated. Whereas the Vikings, their stories just seem to get richer and richer and richer as history
Mhm.
rolls back. And I thought that the choice of was it the Northman, the Skarsgård, wonderful
Oh, yes, it is the Northman.
the Northman.
Although that's just a telling of Hamlet or Hamnet,
Yes,
really.
Hamnet, exactly. But I thought that their choice to make the opening in Ukraine extraordinary. I thought it was really
Mm,
fascinating, and because I think there is only so much you can do when you've got Vikings and the Last Kingdom. There's only so much
mm,
mud can look different, I think.
mhm,
And I believe that the opening is there's that legend of the someone throws a spear and then it's thrown back, and the same spear is grabbed and thrown back at him, and they incorporate it in the film, and that it incorporated into the film, and there's all those wolf-like headdresses, and I was like, for whatever else you
mm,
think of the film, that opening 20 minutes, you
mm,
feel very much like you know what it's like to be in an unusual part of Viking mythology, or rather, maybe not mythology, maybe much more history. And I think that you can understand how the Saxons and the Franks and all the rest on one side, and then all the Eastern powers on the other. I mean, the extraordinary idea of Vikings turning up in Constantinople and
mhm,
not attack is like, this is a very big city. Maybe we'll just go in and trade things for a while, and then see if
mhm,
we can do anything for them. Yeah, it sounds quite good. Like, I love that. It's kind of like a genre mashup, except that it isn't, of course, because it's history. It's these cultures interacting. The last
mhm,
gasp of the Roman Empire mixing with the the flood of Northmen from the frozen north. I mean, it's ripe for adventures, games, books, and so much. So, I mean, and also then I think the nice thing about Steinar, just bringing it back to me,
it's
but
fine.
bringing it back to Steinar, is that he sort of has it down. He's not the Jarl to start with, but he knows it. He's incredibly dangerous. He's incredibly skilled with sword and spear and axe. And he clearly can win over men in
I was gonna say he must have a following to
because
try
he
any of what
went
he
off
did.
presumably with all of Grippa's men. It was like
Mhm,
he was the prow man. He was the foremost warrior. But where did those men come from? I mean, I'm sure he picked up some others, but he's going to have pointed out, if we let Grippa, to trade for beans and things and chickens and stuff and fishing. Oh, lovely. We will be ripped to shreds by Hauke or by any of the other Jarls who can't be bothered to go over to England, or the Saxon kingdoms rather. Um, so he knows. I mean, because when you think about it, there's all these cunning warriors floating around. And if they think, oh, there might be easy pickings there, maybe Bora has big walls, maybe they've got more warriors than the rest. But it's much easier to keep them away if they fear you. And that's
mhm,
what he understands. And so, yeah, he's a villain if you're playing Norse as Gunnar. Of course he is, because he has to be. But I think they're all caught up in the struggle of the time. And
mhm,
if you're a poor player at the game you're landed, it's great. I mean, Grippo would have been a great administrator in the 17th century or something. Wonderful for him when there were laws and consequences to
mhm,
those laws. But when you don't know that a flotilla of a dozen ships are coming for you until they appear at dawn on the horizon, it's not
mhm.
much good unless they're going, I don't like the idea of going for Steinar Far-Spear. He's a nasty bugger. I remember Gunnar, the actor playing Gunnar, when I was, because we were filming the death scenes, and
Mm.
just before they all come and attack me, I should say, they're all gone, all the others are gone by then, but they come and attack me. I'm roaring my best, like, "Come, boy!" I have to step off the microphone so I don't peak us all, but "Come, boy!" And I've been roaring away, like, "What lies you spun to win their loyalty?" And I'm trying to go as deep in my register because I know it's the last time I get to play this fabulous character. And Gunnar, the actor playing Gunnar, just went, he's like, "I'm coming for you, Steinar," and then went, "And cut, T-pose." And then we were just chatting, he went, "I don't want to go and fight the bad man. He's quite scary." And it was just joyful. I mean, it's to have actors that are that giving and that sort of, rather than saying, "Yeah, actually, I'm really tough." Well, actually, I'm really tough. No, I'm the tough. It's not that. It's this
Mm.
thing of just going an appreciation for your work, and then you appreciate each other even
Mm.
more.
I mean, I was gonna say, yeah, if you can Get the actors that you're facing off against, and you're doing your job well.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was that was all I really had left. I was like, I think it was Steinar and his hound at the end. There was no one else there. I'm like, yeah, there are, but it has to be that way because that's the format of the story. So you again that you don't question it. There are ways that it could have got to that point. So you just go, well, what's he going to do? Maybe he knows that he's going to die. So he's just going to meet it as he's met everything, with a sword in his hand and something foul coming out of his mouth.
Well, it's interesting because, it suddenly occurred to me, one of the, as you say, like a moment of clarity, a light bulb moment, that when you mentioned the Northman, of course, with Skarsgård in it, and how it is based on the tale of Hamlet, which of course eventually became Hamlet, Shakespeare. Yes. That is typical. Well, it's not typical, but it's expected. It's what people who know Viking stuff recognize. It's kind of like is the betrayal that we see with Steinar and Gripper, because Hamlet's uncle betrays his father.
Absolutely.
And takes the throne and takes his wife and buggers off to far off places, Iceland of all places.
Yes.
And starts off that whole sorry saga of revenge.
Absolutely. I think the genius in that film is that Hamnet, or is it Peter Skarsgård? There's so many of them. Alexander yes. Skarsgård, I think. He's devoted his life to trying to free his mother, and by the time he gets there and he manages to free her, she's like, "What are you doing? Your father was awful, and I don't want to go anywhere. What have you done?" And he's like, "Oh, well, I've come all this way." And you just sort of, and you do kind of think, well, hang on a minute, she's it's a small kingdom, but she's the top of that kingdom, and yeah, the son would not have seen the relationship or been able to judge the relationship of father. Anyway, once again, we digress, but it was very cleverly done, I thought.
I think that, well, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about all things motion capture, voice acting, and of course, Norse. Oath of Blood is available on Steam. They have got plans to put it out on console, but they're still working on that. So for console players, just hold your horses. But if you have got Steam on a decent gaming laptop, get on board, get on a long ship, come and meet this wonderful bad guy. Because he's also wonderful as well as bad.
Yes, no, hold the line, console players.
But in terms of kind of if you're waiting for the game to come onto console, then I can't heartily recommend reading Giles Christian's books enough. Now, you have got two trilogies to choose from. You've got his first debut Viking-Age series, which starts with Raven Blood Eye, a beautiful title and an epic cover, and it's the one I fell in love with. And then you've got his what I call masterpiece trilogy, which is Sigurd the Lucky and begins with God of Vengeance, which is a beautiful parallel, but not quite identical to Norse the Blood game. But that's where he reaches his peak masterful writing, I think. He kind of he trumps Bernard Cornwell when he hits that trilogy really, really well. But yes, thank you so much, George.
I'm going to hunt these down. Of course, I'm still in Steinar mode, but I genuinely will. I'm fascinated.
And of course, I will say that they're also all available as audiobooks written by the equally hugely talented Phil Stevens, otherwise known as Actual Factor on Instagram, and his voice talent is just phenomenal. Every time he does a female character, I'm just in awe, because he just really he just finds the mellowness, the gentleness. It's not kind of going all high pitched and squeaky like you'd think. That's why I remember him doing his Guinevere role in the Lancelot book that Giles wrote, so absolutely breathtakingly moving. But I will stop fangirling. Because I will be here all night.
I'm taking notes as well. I hope you are, listener.
Oh, and I will actually, one last point. You did, of course, mention near the start of the episode that Giles did write a prequel story to the game. I think it's called Blood Brothers. I could be wrong, but it will be appearing on the screen for those on YouTube, and I'll put the link down below for everyone else listening on audio. But it is available as a little audio book.
It's really glorious, and it's really quick. You can listen to it in just an hour or so, less than an hour. It's such a nice taster of this world and the writing. I heartily recommend as well.
Yes, I think it is also available as an ebook, and I think it just comes to you as a PDF, so you don't even need a Kindle or an e-reader to read it. I really enjoyed it, and as you say, it is about a very interesting adventure that happens because Jarl Gripper loses one of the trinkets that his wife paid a lot of money for, and he knows that he'll be in trouble if he goes home without it. Among other things, without spoiling it too much.
It's a great prequel to Norse. If you're waiting for the console to
Mhm.
come out, listen to that or read that,
Yes.
and it gives you, because I think then the events of Norse Oath of Blood really pack even more
Mm,
of a punch.
absolutely. Absolutely. It it just shows the immersive storytelling talent of Giles and how well he can bring the Viking Age to life. I do kind of like often describe him as kind of, as much as I love and respect Bernard Cornwell, I think Giles Christian is just topping him that bit more every time he writes anything Viking personally.
There you go.
And I do keep telling him that he's got his kind of like cast of characters still in Constantinople, otherwise known as Miklagard, in the end of the Raven Blood Eye trilogy, and he could just bring them out to retirement just for a further adventure. Because I just sat there drinking Greek wine and living off their well-earned loot from other adventures. But yes, thank you so much, George. I wish you
It's
best of luck with all
absolute
your
pleasure.
voice acting roles and duties. Now, if anyone checks out George's website, they will see what a spectrum of talent and voices and things you've been in, from Vikings to Peppa Pig. That's how
That's true.
broad.
I'm also Daddy and Grandpa Pig in Peppa Pig Tales, so I'm not always on the high seas slaughtering people. Sometimes I'm helping them to get through muddy puddles.
Or encouraging people to buy a certain brand of ice cream. I
Oh
remember
yes,
seeing
yes.
it.
I'm also the Nui ice cream brand voice, so that's it's a fun life. It's great fun.
Well, I salute your talents there, and long may it continue to bring you many adventures on and off the screen. And I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming,
And
and
thank
thank
you
you
for
for
having me.
listening
It's been
and
a
viewing.
joy.
And thank you for listening or viewing wherever you are today. And we'll see you all in Valhalla again soon.
Norway, 802 AD. A land ruled by petty kings and jarls. Craftspeople, farmers, seafarers, merchants and warriors band together in settlements for protection and company. They honor gods of fertility and courage, thunder and war.
Get back, you sons! Horse!
Life is hard on this mountainous strip of land facing the grey, storm-tossed Wales Road.
What kind of asshole place is this?
Outlaws haunt the mist-shrouded forests. Raiders prowl the coast like wolves of the sea. Men kill for silver and revenge, for honor and reputation. It is a time when legends are forged in the fires of conflict, and those who have gone before look down from the mead benches of Odin Allfather. This is the dawn of the Viking Age. This is Norse.